Thanks, Ellie. Time now, 20 minutes to 8. Campaigners are calling for more black and mixed race people to register as blood, stem cell and organ donors. This is due to a huge shortfall on donor lists.
Nearly 900,000 people gave blood in England and North Wales over the past year, but just 1% of those were black. Of all the donors on the British Bone Marrow Registry, only 1.2% are from black communities.
Now, while patients who need a stem cell transplant have between a 60 and 90% chance of finding a match, someone from a black or mixed race background has just a 20% chance.
Beverley Degale joins us now. She helped set up the African Caribbean Leukemia Trust after her late son awaited 6 years for a bone marrow donor. Also with us is Mark Thompson, whose wife Sarah survived leukemia after getting a stem cell donor. Good morning to both of you. Thank you so much for coming on the programme. Beverley, if we could start with you, if that's possible. The problem is there's lack of donors within the black community. It's not a new issue, is it? Why do you think there's a reluctance there?
Well, it's interesting. I've been doing this work for 20 years and my son was diagnosed with leukemia 23 years ago. And so this problem has been around previous to my son's diagnosis, and although the situation is getting better, it's a very slow journey, and unfortunately we are still faced with the myths and the fears within our community about this subject matter to this very day.
But the technical point, I suppose, of this is that it's not just the reluctance that's the problem, it is the rarer blood types, and you're nodding, Mark, you know, it's the rarer blood types that can be found in certain communities, and this is what you found with your wife when she needed treatment.
I mean, like me, my wife is from the Anglo-Jamaican community, so we both got a Jamaican parent, a parent of Jamaican ancestry and a British parent, and it's not actually the blood types, it's a common mistake, but there's, on the outside of the white cells there's these HLA types, and those are really diverse. So blood types can go across all kinds of racial groups, or most of them, whereas the HLA types are very specific to sort of different ethnic backgrounds. So when we were looking for a match for my wife, we knew we were looking for somebody who was going to be from a similar background to her.
And do explain what happened to Sarah.
So she was initially diagnosed in 2004, had 4 courses of chemotherapy, and looked to have made a complete recovery. Unfortunately, she relapsed at the end of 2005, and then we had this horrible situation of being told how slim the chances were that we would actually be able to find a donor. At that point, the figures were even more scary sounding. People were telling us that the chances of finding a match was something like 1 in 100,000 for a perfect match, and anything else might have sort of complications further down the line. Now the situation is better, but the reality is if you're from an ethnic minority community, there's something like an 80% chance that you won't find a donor. So only 1 in 5 will be finding it, so 80% won't be able to find it.
Terrifying statistics to hear, particularly when someone you love is involved in it as well.
Absolutely.
And Beverley, your charity was for what, 20 years ago?
Years ago.
Mark's perhaps given us an insight there, but how do you think the situation can and will improve, hopefully?
Well, it needs actually for the community to come together to understand this problem. Now, a lot of people have been hearing this message for 20 years and have maybe sat on the fence on this problem, but we are actually talking about stem cell donation, which is bone marrow donation, blood donation and organ donation, and in all 3 areas there is a problem. And sadly what we see is that until it affects you directly, people are not registering. Now, we're talking about black and mixed race people here today, but actually this is a problem right across, because if you think about it, 4% of people in the UK are blood donors, and there are, 63 million people living in this country, and yet the bone marrow register is made up of just 1 million people. And so we're asking the black and mixed race community to stop sitting on the fence on this subject matter. Most of you have heard this message, but have actually not done anything about it. We don't want it to affect you. We want to be able to create a registry that is big enough so that when donors are needed, whether it be for blood, organ or stem cell donation, that actually we can look at the registers and say, yes, we have 1, 2, possibly 3 matches available. And sadly, at this point, that is not what's happening. And certainly for my son, he waited 6 years. And although he did get a match, he was on treatments for far too long, chemotherapy, radiotherapy treatments, which sadly eventually took his life when he was 21. You know, he beat leukemia, but he couldn't beat the toxicity of those treatments. And so it's really important that people do not sit on the fence on this subject matter and go to the website and find out what you can do as individuals to change this terrible statistics.
And although this message has been going out for 20 years, we're trying to reach a completely different set of people. Most people, in order to join the register, have to be under the age of 40. So 20 years, people that were hearing this message as adults 20 years ago were already not the audience. Our target is really about reaching the young people. Because if you get registered at 18 or 19, you can be on the register for the best part of 40 years, because you can still donate up until you're around 60. So we're really trying to get the message out to the young people.
Mark, Beverley, great to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing your stories as well.
Thank you.
It's 7:45. It's time to talk to Alex to find out what's happening with the morning's weather. Good morning,